Every factory floor has the same rumor. Boomers don't adapt, millennials complain, and Gen Z wants to rewrite the rules. But what if none of that is true? What if the real problem isn't the generations themselves, but the way leadership communicates across them? Today, we unpack the generational clash shaping modern manufacturing and how to turn friction into the most powerful operational advantage.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Never in Reverse podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Axel, co-host, the man, Doug Cox.
Good morning.
Doug is disabled.
Yes. Yep. It's, my time has come. I missed the step. I was moving a couch and,
Dude, that had to hurt so bad.
Yeah. It, out of the back of a U-Haul, missed the step on the bumper and crash and burn. That's life.
Sorry for that, man.
Things happen.
Welcome back, everybody. Is this season for the holidays. Like, subscribe, find us on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Episode 41, we're going to talk about just leading multiple generations and, leading across those generations from younger to older and kind of what that dynamic does. It's, the Gen Zs kind of that we have a lot of Gen Zs on our team and, their experience. I know that, just in the manufacturing sector, which is where we're at, they say like in the next 10 years, I think 40% of manufacturing positions are going into retirement. I mean, that's a big, big transition. And when you see, you're seeing this Gen Z demographic come up and it's like, we're going to go through kind of some things that we see internally and, starting with the engagement, Doug, the Gen Z engagement, I think that the core topic that we typically find is Gen Z is disengaged. I mean, how do you feel about that?
I don't know that it's necessarily disengaged. I just think the expectations, and a lot of it I think is around technology too. I mean, you got to think Gen Z's grown up with technology in their face, in their hands. You go to millennials, you go to Gen X's, back to the boomers. I mean, we didn't always have all this technology in things in automation and information so readily available to us, where I think these Gen Zs, where do they go for knowledge? Where do they go for information? They do a lot of self-research. They do, what is scripted, what is written versus, the other generations. I think a lot of it was by osmosis. It was just, you picked it up, you figured it out, and you learn from it, where the Gen Zs, I think they're information driven, right? They want the information. They want to be told, they want to be shown, or they want to read. They want to study how things work, how things come together. I just think it's different ways of learning that is creating this conflict or misconception, between that
and they're
generation.
Smart, dude.
Very smart, very intelligent.
So disengaged, maybe I sense it's like unchallenged, bored, delegating
that too.
Tasks that are too low level, not pushing hard enough, not casting the vision wide enough to understand that there's a clear path forward. I mean, Generation Z, they want the awesome communication, transparency of where things are heading and why, and trying to, instead of tidbits of data that, it's almost like, and I think you and I have had some experience in this where you have a leader that doesn't give clarity on maybe the 5-year path or the next 12 months of what we envision there and allow them to kind of embrace their skill set into that vision. And if you only give them tidbits of information against the core vision, they're going to have a really hard time being engaged of why they're doing something. Or sometimes I think I tend to do this. I cached a vision that might be too far ahead. Right. And then I'm not able to reel it back far enough to put it in bite-sized pieces. I'll take full responsibility for that because I do that. I know that the end goal, but sometimes I don't do a really good job on bringing it back into pieces that people can consume and deliver on. I'm just always focused on that further point. And
and it's transparency. I think a lot of it, and just this younger generation, they want things scripted. They, job duties and responsibilities. It's like they need to know up front versus figuring things out as you go. And I think it's been kind of difficult, in some elements for us because we're moving pretty quickly and there's not always time to educate and
Ah,
have that transparency cross-departmentally on what's going on or what, the ads, moves, and changes to where there can be some friction in that. It's a good problem, but if you're not aware of it, it can create, I think, bigger problems in itself that there isn't any communication. I really don't know what my job responsibilities are. I don't know what my
I didn't
duties
know that
are.
this has anything interrelated. They're expecting X and B has something that works together, tying those. So I just did that this weekend. There was a roadmap on part of where we're heading, and I said, "Hey, I need this clear roadmap so that I can hand it off to the marketing team so that they can see what you're looking at to make sure that their processes align." Because I think I need to do a better job on connecting those dots to make sure that I'm not expecting this team to meet this team without giving them the information. So they're putting together a roadmap on in this sector to help me educate the other team to make sure where they're aligned. And if they need to communicate together, they can, right? So that's just, and I think that's just more um, me maturing or our team maturing as a whole. Like, cause I don't envision myself just being the only leader here. I want to raise everyone to be leaders, right? And that's my thinking is like, how do we get everyone to embrace their own role together and work as a unit as when needed instead of having these chains of command to put all this fluff into approvals. I want,
Mhm.
and part of my thinking is like, with the Gen Z is like, bringing them into a very archaic industry in manufacturing. And what we do is, seeing where those guys can fit in. And it's just bringing this current level of perspective into our infrastructure, um, paired with, my vision of where I think we should go with technology and allowing them to embrace, their skill sets and push their thinking and growth. And I just, I think that that with the Gen Zs in manufacturing and just, I envision them being a critical component of that. But you have to present something that, if you're remaining old school in your thinking and you're trying to bring them in, I just don't think that they're gonna. I don't get engaged. I know that. I'm like, I I did that before. I did that on my previous role, and I just said, man, I couldn't even get the movement into from 1976 brochure to 2000,
Yeah.
and that was no joke. So, unfortunately, I think you got to cast a vision and give the details enough, um, and allow them to come in and learn and understand, maybe some critical views, but also challenge you. I think that's clear communication is don't just put the thumb on them and just say, be an open book and allow them to bring their skill sets to the table with their views or technology or how to position things and be a great listener. And I think that's something that I continually have to work on is sometimes I got this big vision and I'm running over those moments sometimes where I don't feel like I'm giving enough space to maybe expand my horizon during that next step because I'm so focused on that end goal, right? And that's good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm not.
it just comes back to transparency, because if you're moving, and growing and maturing, and that's part of the culture,
Mhm.
but as you do that, you have to share, this transformation. And if you don't share this transformation with these different age groups and demographics, you're not going to have buy-in. They're not going to have a formal understanding of why these changes are happening, why this vision's going this direction. And then it's going to be met with resistance, not a holistic environment between the age groups. There's going to be animosity because and I think the younger generations are accustomed to moving faster. They've
Oh
seen
yeah.
technology, the way they use technology, they know it's always evolving and grasping and going after that information. The other generations are, this is the way I've done it. This is the way I'm going to do it. This is the way it happens. Well, if you can share that information of where technology and things can create efficiencies for them to move faster, to, you know, less burden on them and responsibility but again, they have to touch it, feel it, smell it to see the advantages in that. And, again, it's just going back to transparency and communication across all gaps.
Yeah, and I think flexibility, I think the generation's getting hit with like very entitled. And I think I went through a perspective of that prior to having a team. I think that the entitlement and flexibility, I mean, it's like this is a very flexible environment, but flexibility does not mean no execution. What they want is that flexibility to have autonomy in their own decision making for their day, however, delivering the results. And I think who cares if they're delivering, right? Like, I think I lived in my first job was the thumb was on me, and it was based off of a timeline per day. I don't really care to be honest, I don't really care when the work happens. I just care that we get what we need.
The results.
On time. Exactly. On time. Like, if we're not doing it on time, the flexibility is outweighing the execution. And I think there's this, you gotta first of all, trust people first, and that you just have to trust them, and then look at the data.
Right.
Trust and then review the data. Like, here's the trust, but you're not delivering the results. Well, now there's a conflict of flexibility versus execution. And I think there's that blend. Like, they want the flexibility without being micromanaged, but they're not entitled. But I think it's also like you and I used to say this, and it's like it's earned, not given. But right. I think that you got to trust people in a sense, because when people tell me something, I'm going to take it as the truth. Mm-hmm. I know quickly if that statement is viable to who they are. No, it's just, do they live a life of integrity by what they say? If they do, I can tell quickly. If not, there's no accountability. There's zero ownership. It's deflection all the time. So I think with this generation, you kind of got to give that to them. One thing I think that's important is the association of knowledge transfer in this manufacturing sector. I think that, one thing that I'm seeing is, transfer of knowledge is especially for manufacturing, is so critically important. I'm not saying that I've always done the best, but I'm not going to give everyone direct access to all my knowledge because I want them to seek to understand. I've always done that. Like, I pushed you to seek to understand, and then I'll help. Because if I just made you understand all the time, it wouldn't sink in, right? Like, pushing you towards the bigger goal where you're at today is like, I look back and go, man, what if I would have just fed him the information and you would have never consumed, digested it with intention. And I think you got to walk this fine line, but you do want to make sure that 22-year-old, 25-year-old can learn through you. Don't just withhold the information completely, right, but give them snippets. I mean, what do you think about that, Doug, based off of you getting into this industry?
Yeah. And in some of that, it's the personality types and how you learn, and it's, we're visual learners first, right? But then again, you can't always be told to you. It has to be learned. And the only way to learn a lot of things is you got to dive in. You got to make mistakes. You got to get in and figure things out. And it's trial and error, right? But again, you got to have some sort of guidance. You got to have a mentor. You got to have a leader. You got to have somebody who's, critical of helping you in your thinking, but yet you need to give people the responsibility that they need to go be self-taught in certain ways as well too. And especially because the only way you're going to learn is by just diving in, rolling up your sleeves. It's no different if it's studies in college or in school. I mean, why do you think you had classroom time and the rest of the studying was on your own? I mean, it's for you to learn, to absorb. Yeah. And then in this knowledge transfer, I mean, there's a lot of technology that's there that you don't want, information living inside of one's head. I mean, you gotta use tools and applications for, again, transparency across generational gaps and different ways in learning. But no, I think the mentorship of that's a critical thing in this. And when you're in the manufacturing world and you're looking on the shop floor where you're using a laser, a brake, welders, choosing that correct person that can lead that onboarding and delegation and I would say making sure they're reviewing the prints correctly. I mean, that's such a critical thing for every inch is a mile. And if you miss a dimension on a weld and you got a big assembly or sub-assembly or whatever you're doing, it could create
back work that's withholding the ability to move forward. And I think just giving people, choosing that right person is just got to be, they got to enjoy passing that tribal knowledge on, and they got to find, I would say, find energy in that, right? Like some people find it drains them when they're doing that, but some people think that's the best thing since sliced bread, and like how to move other people and advance them. And that's, I think you got to be very, very, even though that person might be a really good welder or they might be a really good brake operator, that might not be the right person to mentor. They might be able to use
exactly
access points to those experts in your shop floor, but but you still got to present the information right, and got to onboard them and make sure they're hitting the moments that you need. I think that, the tribal knowledge of what you said though too is like, man, I want to document everything. I want to move us towards clarity, everywhere, without me, without you, without Ben, without anyone else on this team. I want to have a complete ecosystem that's connected and everyone knows where to go, right? Like that's the end result. And that's where I think the tribal knowledge is independent of the person. It becomes part of the culture so that everyone has transparency. It's very clear on where to get it. It's organized. It's data driven. It's not, John does it this way, Peter does it this way. It's everyone's passing on their information. Because I think that if you're not doing that right, the consequences in terms of tribal knowledge or mentoring, or, I mean, it could be you could start seeing QA issues, product related issues, in the field issues, all those things where, you're not going to engage someone because they feel like you're just withholding. They don't feel like they're going to ever learn in this position or whatnot. So I think it's so important to just create more transparency and give more access to the information, to allow those people to seek to understand instead of, well, this is just how you do it. Well, yeah, but I don't know how to do that. Or,
well, and what happens if that person leaves? What if,
exactly,
if they retire, or, they wind up another place of employment and all that knowledge walks out the door, and now you're handcuffed. And now, because you didn't share what information that person held on to through years of experience, it's not documented, it's not archived, it's not put in a place. Well, now you got to try to pick up where that person left off, and you don't have a playbook. You got a problem.
And think about like this, you got a very matured manufacturing industry that, in the next 10 years, like I said earlier, majority of them are going to be retiring. And so the amount of tribal knowledge there, if you don't choose today to go through correct mentorship using that legacy knowledge, you could have some serious consequences that could be detrimental to the future. These generations now can consume so much more information so much quicker. But still, there's an art to manufacturing. There's an art to
there's
40
a skill.
years of that tribal. There, you got guys have been doing this 30 years, and sometimes it's not textbook perfect, but the real world teaches you skills, and those things are so important to pass on. Right. It's and that's where I think the generational to generational communication, that could be challenging, because I can sense that the old generation's like, this is just figured out, like, have some grit, get it done.
Yep.
And the new generation's like, man, I don't want to make a mistake. Can you show me, what does that look like? Can I learn to you? And then just figure it out. Like, that's how I did it. I think there's some of that can be very limiting to the new generation, but the old generation doesn't see it as that. They just see it as, this is how I did it. Who cares that, you have a different expectation? The older guys are like that. I've seen it.
Oh yeah.
Welding,
yeah.
The welders.
Yep. I mean, it's the guys that cut their teeth, right? The ones and they don't, and I think in some cases, there's some resistance in sharing of that information, because it's like, okay, now if I educate this person, are they gearing them up to replace
exactly
me? No, it's not threatening. That's not the idea behind it. And I think that's where, folks need to do better jobs of clearing the room of, no, look, for us, it's transparency, it's teamwork, it's unison, it's not, Tommy's holding all the information and not sharing it with Joe. It's like, no, you two together make us better, not 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 conflict of interest. It's like, let's that teamwork, that involvement, and education and lifting everybody up. But I mean, I get it. The old school way is like, I've got the information, I've got the knowledge, I've got the expertise, and why should I educate this person? Why should I make them better? Let themselves make themselves better.
And then that new generation's they're going to feel withheld from getting, maybe their performance, or there's a misunderstanding. Like, I can't execute this job because I'm not getting onboarded appropriately, or there's no mentorship program that allows me to get to that 30 years of experience with the tips and tricks and how they look at things and how they look at a drawing versus the weld. Or maybe there's a environmental condition that changed, or, the temperatures, et cetera, what type of steel. There's just, stainless versus mild. There's a whole dynamic that you just, they're not going to, when you get in the real world and you see a print, that's different than a perfect textbook view of something where you're learning, right? There's a little bit different layer of pressure and expectation. And I think that giving those, creating a lot of structure in an organization that is leaning towards that, kind of flipping over to the new generation, it's important to take that tribal knowledge and start doing it today, so that you're already prefacing, like, listen, guys, we're going to start organizing our information to create better structure so the deliverables are consistent. So these generational, I guess, when you're turning it over, there's not this massive tidal wave of, oh my gosh, we have no idea what we're doing. It's let's start today and start moving that over. And I think as leaders, it's important to, if you don't have the right mentorship program, to take the lead and get in there with them and show and start creating the structure and leading those older generations to work together with the new, and bridging the gap with clear documentation, so that either you can watch it or you can read it or you can see it with images. Whatever you need to do to get there, you need to start doing that today. Because in 10 years, when you have that 40% turnover, you could be sitting there going, oh, dude, oh, boy. We don't have anything documented. We don't understand our processes. I heard the other day, this recent graduate, newly hired, did not know where to put a stamp on an envelope.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So I'm telling you, that's scary.
The basics.
The basics. So if that generation, imagine if we were going through this huge transition, that's the basics. So the deep level of artmanship and skill in the crafts of manufacturing, you need to get really, really clear on and concise and document this stuff. So it's very easy to replicate the skill set. So I think that there's, just in general, the Gen Zs, just get really clear on the communication, be transparent to the expectations where you're going, cast the vision together, let the input happen. It's not, this is my way and the highway. I tend to get excited but I also come back and go, hey, how do we push together? Is there any ideas that I want to know? Like, I don't want to be the only one thinking something, because I'm not seeing everything, right? Sometimes I got a one-track mind, and but being open with everyone and giving those
right.
opportunities.
And then just having the right leadership, mentorship, and position, the person that's got the right personality to lead, to understand, to listen, to educate. I mean, I think that's critical too, because they're going to be that pivot point of that hub in the wheel of where that information is going to flow and transfer between, generations, personalities, somebody who's got a firm understanding of why they're in that position and what the role and structure and responsibilities are, in that mentor position, because they're that, I think that pivotable person in that element or in that position, to where they're setting expectations, they're sharing, they're educating, they're challenging, they're making everybody else around them better. But it's a right personality set that's in that position.
Yeah, and I think as we wrap this episode down, I think it's just the biggest thing is just to make sure everything is in alignment from a perspective of even in maybe where your generation sits. You got to be like a hybrid in between the plus and minus, and sit in that dynamic middle ground and try to bridge the gaps. But I think it's important to get to work on documentation and procedures that are current. not an SOP that's aligned with the baby boomers or the Gen X's, but you're kind of getting that hybrid position where you can cross-functionally operate together, where it's, the Gen X or Gen Z's, it doesn't matter. It's because there's transitions in those generations that blend over to the next. So you got to kind of find that middle ground as you evolve and make sure that it's working for everyone. Right.
Right.
And some people don't like change. So you better be prepared. They might not be there, and that's okay. Because in 10 years, they're likely not going to be there anyways. So, yeah, but just giving that adaptation, but doing it in a positive manner where people can get behind it and see perhaps a new vision or a new direction. It's super important. So as we wind this episode down, guys, we really appreciate you guys joining us on episode 41 of Never in Reversed. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. See you guys on episode 42. I'm your host, Jeremy Axel, co-host, the man, Doug Cox. Until next time, guys, we appreciate it, and thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.